It's Johna Rodgers, GPC. I am the principal consultant and owner of Johna Rodgers Consulting. And I have been in this role for 6 years this month. In fact, this week, 6 years. And I came from an educational setting where I had been for 15 years. I have always been a writer. One of my first part-time jobs in high school was at a newspaper. My mother was very big into writing, and my brother and I both, my brother was not a fan of my mom's. Too long a story, but he will tell anybody who'll listen. If she hadn't just been such a sergeant every summer making us write essays. That was my mom. She made us write an essay every week during the summer, and we both ended up in writing. So, but I worked first at a newspaper, just working on the weekends. Later, that became a sort of full-time job, and I moved into reporting. But I also, in between, had nonprofit gigs that I would do, lots of volunteer work when the babies were small. I did not finish college until I was in my mid-30s, just because I was too busy. It's just too busy having babies, and there was a recession. That was the we married, and this isn't a side note. We married on April 29th, and while we were on our honeymoon, my husband was laid off. So yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yes, my husband says March 29th. March 29th. He's correct. So on April Fool's Day, he was laid off. So, I just never got college finished until much later. But I was always writing. I ended up for a short stint as in business, in corporate, for a CFO of a large company. And his idea was that writers are thinkers, and if he had someone as an assistant who could think and write, he'd be, And so I wrote proposals for jet airplanes and everything from acre lots to jet planes to whatever. We did whatever we had to do. And I went from there back into full-time nonprofit. I had a couple of executive director stints, and in that capacity, I ended up writing grant proposals instead of business proposals. And that's how, and I don't even remember the first one. I was with Habitat for Humanity. And I remember Ms. Lemons handing it to me, Miss Martha, and saying, Johna, this looks like something you can do. But I don't remember writing it. I don't know if we won it or not. That was just the first one. And after that, it was just, that was one of the hats. And that was for a good number of years off and on until I landed in education, and then it became my full-time job, and has been since 2001. Yeah, well, since before that, but yeah, 2001, it's been my full-time. I've done nothing but grants since then. I think that's a great question. There's several things in there, but being able to listen. When I was a newspaper reporter, that's what you have to do. You have to listen. You have to ask good questions, and I think that's asking questions and being pesky about it, and always asking why. Why is it this way? Why do you do it like this? That's really important to our work. Okay, well, you want $1 million for your organization. Why? And it may take 10 or 15 whys to get them all the way back to here's our problem and we want to make it better. And that's where all grants start, is what is your problem? Most clients and individuals think that their problem is that they don't have enough money. And that's not what the funder thinks is a problem. So we have to get them all the way back to what's the problem with your clients, with your people, with puppies, whatever. So just being able to ask questions and then to organize, it's probably my favorite part of the process, organize their thoughts into a good program so that that can be successful. And so all of that comes from that whole writing process, is being able to figure out what paragraph where, and how you organize it so that the reader will get it. A lot of us write, and we write a lot, but if the reader doesn't read it, it's really a waste of our time. So we have to figure out ways to make them read it and make it easy for them to read it. So that's yeah. And that's, anytime you're in any kind of journalism, that's really important, is knowing who your audience is. So listening, asking questions, and knowing to whom you write. Those are some of the biggies. Most people don't understand what grants are to begin with. So that's, and so they always think we're writing money for scholarships, or some bizarre thing like that we're not doing. So we have to kind of explain it to them. But I think what they're most surprised about is that we get paid to do it, and that it's a real job, with lots of pieces and parts. So the general public's not that educated about it. I am so fortunate. All of my clients have histories, a successful history of grant writing, so I don't have to, for the most part. Now I do talk to people from time to time, but in terms of working, they're already trained. It's like if you got a puppy and they're already housebroken. That's how I consider my clients. They're already housebroken. So I don't have to worry about that. But I just think they're surprised, first, that it's even a thing, and then second, that people actually do it. The other thing, I think people, and I've had lots of colleagues tell me this, Johna, I could never do what you do. I could never do that. And my thought is always, sure you can. It's just paperwork. If you sat down and you really worked at it and you practiced and you did it for a while, you'd get good at it. I mean, and because everybody has, and I mean this, everybody has in our field now has more education than I do. Most people have a master's degree. I only have a bachelor's. And most grant professionals now have more. And my clients all have more. And yet they don't think they can do this. And that's surprising to me. My very first, I had I was by the seat of my pants for years. Um, but when you land in education, they believe in education. I mean, they really, really believe that you should have all this professional development. So, like my first 6 months when I was in education, they sent me to the Grantsmanship Center, and I went through the week long boot camp. I've done several trainings, like with grant management concepts and just different things through the years. I became a GPA member. I think I'm in my 17th year, so 16, 17 years ago. And so my business degree, I mean, it serves me well, but really my other experiences in nonprofit, in writing, in event management, in coordinating people, that has been the on the job training has been probably more important than the schooling, the formal schooling I have. I do have the GPC credential, which I am very. I was an original subject matter expert, and was the exam administrator for the first probably 5 years of the exam. And that was an education all in itself, continues to be. I can't tell you how many times I think of I had to write some quizzes this week, and I'm like, okay, is that a good stem? And what are my responses? And can I use none of the above here? Yes, I can. It'll be fine. And how do you write the question not in the negative? And so my education has been both formal and informal, but most of my grant stuff has been on the job, and lucky to have found GPA. Actually, GPA found me, but that's okay too. And just working with my peeps. I do mentor, and I do it formally and informally. I usually have 2 or 3 formal mentors at a time, mentees at a time, and then I'll have some who just reach out and say, "Hey, can we talk for a while? I need a mentor on this issue." I will also say that I sometimes mentor outside of my field. So if there's a nonprofit person in my community, I have, this is before COVID. I had a couple of executive directors and organizations who would just say, Johna, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm burned out, blah, 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 blah. And so it's, it's where the executive director is like the only employee, that kind of thing. And we will talk about you. We'll just go to lunch, and over a period of months, we'll, I'll listen and help them work through their thoughts on that. I don't know how much that helps, but at least they can whine to me and they don't have to go home and kill their spouse. Uh, so I've done a lot of that. Again, as I said, formal and informal. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 calls. Sometimes it's a year that we talk. Do I have any folks that have mentored me? The answer would be yes, in snatches. It's when I was first learning, we didn't have something called a mentor. We didn't do that. But in Kentucky, there are 8 cooperatives, and I worked at one of the cooperatives. And so again, a boss was smart enough to say, you need to go talk to Sandy, and you need to go talk to whatever her name was, which I can't remember, Sylvia, I think. And that was a start. Sandy was not too open to being a mentor, but Sylvia was. My buddy Todd now is a great one. My friend Jason Atkins. I've got Susan Decker Davis. So now I have lots of them. If I've got an issue, I can just call them up and say, hey, it's not so much a mentoring thing as it just is a just in time. I need some help with this thing. Can you do that? And so, and it goes both ways. Todd is about to retire from Western Kentucky, and he has, it's been fun. He's touched base with me several times over the last few weeks. Okay, so how do I do this? I'm trying to be nice. How do I do this? It's okay. Here's what you're going to do. And he'll say, okay, yes, I got it. I will smile. I'm just going to smile for 2 more months. I'll get there. So it's just been people, everything we do in this life, when it's the first time, it's hard. And so I just try to help folks when they need it and hope that they will be there when I need it. This week, I posted a question on Grant Zone about grant calendars, and I've gotten a plethora, huge amount of interest in this topic, which is why I'm trying to get more organized. It's not working yet, but I've seen names I've never seen before, and that's been really nice, is having all those folks who are kind of new to the zone come in and give their opinions on that. So yeah, that's been a really good thing. And I will also say that and I didn't really realize this till this last week, talking to Pat Dubose. She said that when she was in her burnout journey, that one of the things that really helped her was giving back to GPA, was becoming more involved in her own chapter. And that's what mentoring does for me. When I'm sitting with someone I'm mentoring, I feel my own worth. I can feel that I've survived this, that, or the other thing, whatever it is. And that has been a really critical part of my success, is being able to continue to support others. And I tell everybody, I would not still be in grants if it wasn't for GPA and being able to do that. So just to be able to have a group that can help me and a group I can help at the same time. Probably the best is having a little more control, allegedly, over my calendar, and being able to say no. When you're an employee, when the boss says we're going to write for this grant, sometimes it doesn't matter what you say, you're going to write for that grant. And you're going to spend 100 to 150 hours on a grant that, because you're a professional, will not be funded. And it seems like a real waste of time and money. I've done that many times, and sometimes they don't listen, and that's just the way it is. So that's probably the best thing, is just having some more control, and not dealing with that crud. And the most exciting thing is when, and really is, when I take a set of ideas that a client has, and it may be even something I have no idea what we're doing, because I've done software grants, I do research. I learned a new term this week, expeditionary learning. I have no idea what that means, but it's a new thing, and I'll know a lot about it in another month. I don't know anything about it right now, but being able to listen to their ideas and bring it way down, because sometimes they're PhDs and stuff, and bring it down to regular speak, and somehow communicate that as to what it will look like for kids, so that the reader can see it. Because I figure if I can't understand it, my reader can't either. So I try to get it down a little bit. So I love that part where I get off the phone with somebody and it's like, wow, they are doing amazing work, and I get to sit here in my pajamas and help them with that. Amazing. So that excites me a lot, is just learning the good things they're doing and helping them move the ball down to the goalpost. Especially for employees. I mean, it's, for me, I didn't know enough about burnout. I didn't know enough about um, taking care of myself, and I didn't know enough about how to be a grant professional in my organization. When I arrived at my educational co-op, I was employee number 8. By the time I left, there were 130 employees. So there was a lot of growth, and I was in at the ground floor. And so I did a little bit of everything, including full-time grant writing, and then more grant writing, and then more grant writing. And we didn't have the infrastructure there for a grant professional. We had the infrastructure for Johna, and that was different. So one of the things that I think is most important is that the bosses, the supervisors, the colleagues have enough education about grants so they can support the grant professional. You know, at some point, my colleagues would say, well, Johna was always in the middle of everything. She was just always there doing all these things. Well, because I was trying to get my information. It wasn't because I was just wanting to be in the middle of stuff. I needed to work. I needed to get the information to write the grant proposal. And I don't think they ever figured that out. I don't think that was something, um, a lot of bosses and colleagues think that, well, you're the grant writer. We want a grant for a box of marbles. Okay, what am I supposed to say about a box of marbles? I've got to go out and figure that out. I've got to come back to you and say, what are you going to use the marbles for? So when I talk with especially young grant professionals, it is about the collaborative nature of grants. It is about how to get, and I don't have the answer here, but it has to be done. We have to get that information from them. For some of my bosses, it's been getting 5 minutes on the phone and just listening to them talk. For others, it's been them handing me articles and then I ask them questions. So it's figuring out for every boss and every set of colleagues, what's the best way I can work with them? And then trying to get them to understand this is the norm, not the weird thing. Having those conversations is what writes a grant, not Johna in a little room all by herself. Okay. And it becomes evident to them when they're reading the proposal and they recognize their own words coming back at them. Whenever possible, I try to use some unusual things. I use the boss's granddaughter's name in the proposal. I use whatever I think is going to grab their attention. I use them and their education journey as part of the proposal. So things that they'll notice to show them I'm listening and I'm making it their proposal. because the number one rule is it's never Johna's proposal. It's always our proposal. That way, when we win, we all celebrate. When we maybe don't win, at least we've learned something and we are all going to go out and try again. I may do 85 to 90% of the work, but it takes everybody to get 100% of it done. So that's probably the number one thing there. I can't do it all. I can do most of it, but not all. And the better I am at demonstrating that, not whining, not complaining, not ranting and raving, but it just helping them by demonstrating those conversations and the information gathering. That's what I need to do. Now, how do I do that? Well, I don't make them go to the GPA conference. I don't make my colleagues sit down and have a grant training. But in staff meeting, I may ask a 2-minute question and we get some little nugget shared. Or I may say, hey guys, I was working on Susie's grant this week and this is what I learned. It was so cool. Okay, and just to demonstrate to them that I didn't know that. Wow, how would I ever know that? Susie knew it. Susie brought it to me, and now Susie and I are working on this project. So at every opportunity, this sort of introvert is always trying to elevate the colleagues around me and their role in helping us be successful, because it's not just me. Everybody thinks it's just the grant pro. It's not. So educate from within. And there's a phrase that we use a lot now, leading up. How do we lead up to the leadership? And that's a big part of it. A big part of it is just have a conversation and say, okay, this is where I am. This is what I need. And this is how I think we can get there in the next however many days. Because I've learned nobody ever has time for the grant pro. So the grant pro has to figure out how to wiggle in there and make the time anyway.